Hello and welcome to the Gonzales Mitchell Show. I'm Clay Mitchell,
And I'm Patrick Gonzales.
and today our special guest is Captain Rob Newberry. He is chairman of the Delmarva Fisheries Association, and he is reporting directly from his office. How are you doing, Captain Newberry?
I'm doing good today considering the weather. It's a beautiful day in Maryland.
Oh, it just looks awful behind you. It really does.
I know it's horrible to have an office window like this.
Oh, when it rains in your office, that's the worst, isn't
Oh, I go in the shed for that.
it? So, Rob, what's going on with the Delmarva Fisheries Association? What do you got going on?
Well, the Delmarva Fisheries Association is a 501c6 trade organization. We represent those on the Delmarva and the seafood industry, indirectly and directly. And we have a few farmers that are attached to us too. But basically, our job is to make sure that my guys keep working and that the over regulations that are upon us kind of get deregulated a little bit. And it's turned into a full-time job. I've been doing it for 35 years now. Delmarva Fisheries
Wow.
been around for 12 years, and it's just gotten busier and busier and busier. I'm semi-retired and focusing all my efforts on trying to keep my guys working right now.
Right. Oyster season comes up here in a couple weeks. Uh, how do you foresee the oyster season going this year? And is there any issues with the oystermen?
Well, I mean, probably the biggest thing we're looking at is price coming in. It's probably going to come in lowballed price this year. Last year we had an excellent season for our fourth year in a row. We were a little over, I think we were a little over 400 to 500,000 bushels total caught last year, and 700,000 the year before that. Just the market side, people are tightening up their pockets and do not. But our problem that we have is the potential regulations coming at us in the oyster industry. It's
And,
uh,
and what
it's it's
what are
it's
those? What are
crazy.
those? What
Well, we
regulations are
just
those? Yeah.
well, for instance, we just had a meeting yesterday with the Shell and Substrate Task Force, and Commissioner Ronnie Fithian of Kent County had met with the governor last year and expressed our concerns about our lack of shell for restoring oysters. So, at Ronnie's request, the governor set up a task force, and once again, it's another task force that all they did was talk, 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 and
Yeah.
they came up yesterday with their I guess their summary for their draft to send to the governor for his report, and it is not good. It is not good. Um, it's just we've got a situation where we're saying we're shell poor, but every waterman on the bay, and I can say every waterman on the bay knows of an area up in the northern bay called Man o' War Shoals. It's a huge bar, oyster bar that is basically it's been abandoned. There hasn't been an oyster produced on it in over 10 years. The state hasn't found a living oyster on the bar that we would be using for dredge material in 5 years, 4 years anyway. And the environmental groups say that they don't want it dredged, but that would be a 50 years supply of shell for the industry, for sanctuaries, for aquaculture, and anybody else that wanted shell to get in the oyster business. But it's sitting in front of the Board of Public Works right now. It's approved by every alphabetical agency in the government, every agency in the state. But the environmentalists are holding it up because they said it's a three-dimensional bar and it would devastate the bay if they dredged it. And that's
Hey, let me
about as
let
far
me
from the. Go ahead.
Rob, let me interrupt real quick.
Yeah.
Explain in real simple terms, what are the environmentalists saying will be the impact if you dredge that potential area?
I have to be point specific on the groups. The Coastal Conservation Association said that it is a excellent place to fish and that many fishermen fish there. Um, that's not true. I've been in the charter business 45 years of my life, and I probably fished there one time. Majority of people fish on the northern edges of the eastern side, like from Tolchester south. Very few people fish on that bar. The Chesapeake Bay Foundation has stated that if we dredge the shell, the oxygen depletion would destroy and deteriorize or basically break down the shell. But my question is, when I scratch my head, it's been there 15,000 years and it's still there. I would think that the oxygen, well, they said when you open it up, well, we had a program from 2006 back to 1960 that was the seed and shell program done by the state of Maryland. And we produced roughly $1.5 billion worth of oysters over that year. We spent $48,000 of state money doing that, or 48 million doing that. And the Bay Foundation said that that was a waste of money, but they didn't look at the column to the right, which was the return in revenue was $324 million. So that's a pretty good investment for, 50 million, you're getting 325 back. But the amount of money that it generated in the billions of dollars to the coffers of the state of Maryland and to the industry was exorbitant. So I can't see any reason why we should not be dredging man-o-war shoals, but they seem to think that it would devastate the bay. But guys, on the other hand,
do they have any empirical past experiences that would suggest that what they're claiming is true? Or is it based on feelings?
Well, in 2006, when they pulled the permit, the environmental groups said that the plume was hurting the spawning fish, and that digging in the bottom destroys the benthic environment, specifically the benthic worms. Well, after a year after that was done, DNR did a study. The plume had no effect on the fish, and in fact, it enhanced the growth of benthic critters in the bay. So they really, you got to put it straight out there. The reason why they don't want this done is it would create such a influx of creating more oysters. They'd be out of a job. The bay would, in 18 months, we would know that this would be a very important issue and that it would bring the oysters back. It would help with the removing a lot of the sediment that comes out of the Conowingo Dam, which is a major killer of the Northern Bay. It's just the catastrophic issues that come out of that Susquehanna River are just disgusting. But then, you've got pollution problems. The oysters filter out the pollution. They filter out all the bad nutrients. But, it's just like, I guess they don't want it. It's the old saying, like, if the doctors found a cure for the common cold, there wouldn't be any doctors left.
Exactly.
So, it's just a shame that we have to deal with people like this that, that have the millions of dollars to go to Annapolis every year, and they convince the legislature that the watermen are the problem, the farmers are the problem, and they can solve the problem. Well, they've been doing it for 50 years. They've given the Bay a D-. So if they're running my school, I'm taking my kids to another school or getting them fired, one or the other.
Is there a way to, instead of the dredging like you're talking about, to start off with a smaller one just to prove the point that there is going to be no harm, and in fact, this is environmentally beneficial to the bay? Is there any convincing to them at all about that?
Well, yes and no. You use by example, for instance, you have the Port of Baltimore that every year, this year they dredged over 2.5 million cubic yards of material out of the approach channels to Baltimore and as far north as like up around the Elk River. They had no study done. They had no anything done. Their plume was huge because they used basically a slurry dredge. We would be using a vacuum cutter head dredge, which basically returns hardly any fines back in the water. And it's, we've done studies, we have a shell program here in Maryland right now. We sent like roughly 500,000 bushels down to Virginia, and we only got back 100,000. Basically, that's about all we got. Now we're having to hunt shell down all the way out on the west coast of Washington, Oregon State, and this committee that they put together is even exploring bringing it in from foreign countries. But the bottom line is, we got shell sitting there that the state of Maryland owns. That's 250 million bushels and 50 years of supply. But you basically got a nickel holding up a dollar bill. So, we're just trying to get it moved forward.
When you talk about the shell that's underneath, for people that don't know, are these ancient shells, or are they new shells, or are they? Go ahead.
They're prehistoric shells, and like I said, that's what we dredged on from 1960 to 2006, and we averaged 4.5 million bushels a year that we planted. Now, it would take 12 years at the rate we're at right now to keep up with 1 year of what we used to do. And the reason that they did it is that it was working, and I guess people didn't like the fact that the bay was getting cleaner. So it's a head scratcher, guys. It's just, when you see what's happening in the Northern Bay specifically and all over the bay by, not being able to get shell, more regulations, people crying, harm and foul, and things are getting bad. But we had was it 5 years ago? We had 125,000 bushels. Now we're knocking on 500,000 every year. So, that's what the watermen have done. They haven't done anything. I mean, I just had to say it that, and to give you a prime example, when we do our work in the bay and we plant seed oysters, on a seed oyster that comes either from Virginia or is brought from another area in Maryland that is about the size of a dime to a quarter, there is a 94% survivability rate on that oyster. The way that the state is doing it right now, and this is a fact, it comes out of the University of Maryland lab down in Solomons, and they said there is a 95 to a 100% mortality in the way that they do the spat on shell. So they're spending millions of dollars getting back, let's give them a good average, 95% or 5% return on their money. When we do it as watermen, and we get a 95% return on our money.
What's the reason? What's the reason that this message isn't getting across in Annapolis, do you think?
Money. And it's money. It's the lobbying done by the Bay Foundation and special interest groups that are in the environmental groups that just, when you go to a meeting, Clay and Patrick, when you go to a meeting and someone from the Bay Foundation says, our intentions is to replace the wild fishery with aquaculture in the next 3 years. That was said 4 years ago. Well, I hope they got a lot of salt because they ate those words. Aquaculture did maybe 100,000 bushels. We're 400% higher than what they do. It's a good business to be in if you got a lot of money to spend and grind your head to get a market, but it's not going to clean up the bay, and it's not the salvation for the industry. The industry is to get more oysters in the bay to clean the water and to support this, this industry we've got for oysters in Maryland. We're behind the curve right now.
Well,
Go ahead,
just real quick. On a personal level, I was at a party Sunday over in St. Michael's. I love oysters more. I love oysters. Let's put it that way. And
right.
I mean, and they're okay. They're these teeny little shells. The oysters are small. And I knew they weren't from Maryland because the season doesn't even open until the 1st, right? And I said, where are these from? And they're saying they're from Massachusetts. And I'm not picking on Massachusetts. But guys, there is nothing better than a Maryland oyster about the size of a baseball glove that I can grab and jam in my mouth and do that about a dozen times in a row.
There you go, buddy. There you go.
That's right.
Good old Maryland oyster. You got it. Now, aquaculture can sell them right now, but, they sell them smaller. They're more expensive. It's a niche market. I have no problem with the niche market. But when it comes down to feeding the populace and everything, Maryland should be at the top of the level. But with the pollution problem in the bay, the regulations these ridiculous regulations that are coming out, and the position of this administration towards the Eastern Shore and the watermen as a general. And I do want to say, and I want to put this out there, when the governor ran, he said nobody left behind. Well, hold on a second. He left all the watermen behind, along with the farmers and the people of the Eastern Shore. That's a fact. A fact. I mean, we have been left in the. There's no working with the industry here in Maryland by the administration right now. And as a matter of fact, on February 18th of 2023, and it's online, I was requested by the governor to meet him in Easton at Rise Up Coffee in Easton. He said in front of about 300 people, this is my go-to man. Where's my Captain Newberry? And I stood up. I will not make a decision or do anything to affect this industry unless he is at the table with me and we discuss this. I have not heard a word from him since that date. Not one word. Not one word.
Well,
from anybody in his administration, not one word.
Hopefully we get the word out through this podcast, and you'll be invited to the
I hope
table.
he calls me up this afternoon after he had this great meeting with Anthony Brown this morning about suing for the bridge in Baltimore. Call me up. I'd love to talk to him about this. Hey, Wes, I'll be at the crab feast tomorrow. Come by our tent.
I'll see you, Rob, at the crab feast tomorrow.
Oh, well, our tent is right at the back to the left-hand side. You can't miss it.
I'll search you out.
Yep, you can't miss us, man. I'll be out front, large and in charge, buddy.
Good, man.
But one thing I do want to, if I can touch on, guys, one quick, is the importance about pollution in the Chesapeake Bay, because We are the stewards of the largest estuary in the Northern Hemisphere. And our pollution problem in the Chesapeake has really got to be addressed. I mean, between Baltimore, the Conowingo Dam, and other rivers in Maryland, we're in a bad way in Maryland right now as far as the quality of our bay. I mean, I've been on the bay my entire life, and I can remember when you could see 7 or 8 feet. It's disgusting now. I mean, we've got literally millions of gallons. 2 days ago, a main line broke up in Pennsylvania into the, not directly, but from a creek on the Susquehanna that dumped over several million gallons of raw sewage on it. And their philosophy is, oh, it'll go downstream. Well, yeah, what's downstream? Chesapeake
Us.
Bay, guys.
Right.
You know, millions of gallons, hundreds of millions of gallons are dumped every year, and no one seems to do anything about it, specifically coming out of Baltimore and the Western Shore. But if a little town in Maryland dumps 50 gallons in the water, oh, they shut everything down. I
They
mean, this
do.
has got to be addressed. It's affecting everything. It's affecting our fish. It's affecting all of our life here in Maryland, and it's got to be done now.
Let's suppose it's the best of all possible worlds. You're allowed to do the dredging, and you're allowed to put the shells out. What's the condition
Right.
of the bay 5 years after that?
Well, I can tell you, we will know in 18 months exactly what is going to happen with uh, the oysters, because that gives us enough time to see what we're going to produce. I would say in a 3-year period, if we get the amount of oysters over we need, you'll see a major change in the water quality. Major.
And that's the natural way of doing things. You're not
We
filtering
It worked fine
artificially.
for
You're
46 years, Clay. We did it, and now we will not even discuss this at meetings. The environmentalists do not want to talk about bringing this program back. It is poison to them. They don't want it.
Well, Captain Newberry, do you have any closing remarks you'd like to make?
Um, Yeah, I mean, the closing remarks is the major concern that we have, or things that have to be addressed to this industry that not only affect the watermen, but also affect, well, it's the 2 largest industries in the state. Number 1 is agriculture. Number 2 is the seafood industry. And issues like the Conowingo Dam, and what are we going to do with the discharge permit? Are they going to have that? Are they going to clean the dam up? What are they going to do? This can's been kicked down the road too long. You've got man-of-war shoals and the dredging of shell. That can's been kicked down the road too long, and it's been since 2009. It's been sitting for 5 years in front of the Board of Public Works with no action taken on it. That has to be addressed either up or down. But, a lot of the issues that we have to look at here, the harvesters in Maryland, which are the farmers and the watermen, we have one thing in common. We harvest for a living. These over-regulations and this stupid regulations they need a checkup from the neck up. And in closing, I had a thing when I was in college, and I learned from my professor our first day in class. And he put it up on the board. And it's a very intelligent thing to say, and it's truthful what's happening right now on everything we do in the Bay. It says, when you politicize a natural resource, 2 things happen: the demise of that resource and the demise of the people that make their living from that resource. That is happening as we speak in Maryland right now. Our watermen have an average age of 63 years old. The young kids don't want to get involved in it because they see what the older guys had to go through. So let's get the stupidity out of it, get the politics out of it, work with Mother Nature, work with the good Lord, get this bay cleaned up, and stop dragging your feet in the mud and listening to these groups that all they do is line their pockets with money and fundraise. That's all they do. It's got to stop, and it's got to stop now. If this governor wants to be the hero and the, fancy dancy and everything else, come work with the watermen. Sit down and listen to what we have to say. Listen to what the farmers have to say. Don't just go to certain groups that are getting big returns and money sent to them. Come talk to us. Like the old saying is, if your electrics go up in the house, you don't call a dentist, you call an electrician. If the bay's bad, you call the first primary environmentalist in the bay, and that is the watermen. The watermen are the frontline environmentalists. That's about all I got to say.
Captain Robert.
Amen.
Yes.
Amen.
And
Well,
one other thing, Governor
sure.
Moore, I don't like being left behind. I know my watermen don't like being left behind. Get on the bandwagon. Call me on the phone. Let's talk. How about that?
Captain Robert Newberry, It was a pleasure to have you today. I want to have you back on the show, say after the election. Uh, we could discuss what was going on during session, what's coming up about these regulations.
Right.
Wish you all the luck in the world. And I'm happy to see that you are leading the way for our watermen, especially here on the Eastern Shore.
Well,
Good
thank
work,
you.
sir.
Thank you. Eat more
Well, that-
seafood, guys. Live longer.
well, now it's the end of the show, Captain, and it's time to say goodbye, Patrick.
Adios, Patrick.
Arrivederci, Patrick.
Goodbye, Patrick. Captain Newberry, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much for having me on. God bless. Take care.